It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you, to be here at with the Bethany community, and to take this next 45 minutes or so to talk to you about faith and love. And that's the kind of title of our talk. And a lot of the work that I do day to day is helping couples find faith in the love that they have. And this title is kind of like a two-sided coin. On the one hand, it is about building confidence in the love that you have in a relationship through the ways that you can bring faith and the ways in which God is relevant to what we do in the everyday life of love with one another. But it's also true, and this is the other side of the coin, that sometimes in love, sometimes in marriage, we find God at work in us. So that's the idea of finding faith in love. How did I do?
That was good. We actually debated whether he would explain it the way I thought he should. I think you did.
We just have this ongoing problem. Yeah. Like I have an idea, and it's really good. I mean, I just think the idea is enough.
But I think maybe I can improve upon it.
Yeah. And that doesn't always work. But it worked today, so I think we can go on.
I think we can move on. So as we were preparing for this talk, our differences just come to the forefront, right? And we're trying to figure out how are we going to do this together. Jim is all about ideas and about framing and theology and best practices and making sure the substance is rock solid. And I'm about well, how are we going to apply it? How are we going to put this into action? And so when we bring the best of ourselves together, we're complementing each other, but there can be friction, just like probably all of you have encountered. So we come to you today with that humility of knowing that even though we now have, we got married as babies, but 42 years of experience, being married to each other, we're still learning, we're still working through those differences. So just very briefly, we have 3 adult children. 2 of those have fallen in love in the last couple years. One, our son eloped, surprised us, didn't expect that, but that's what happened. We know our daughter's about to get engaged. We've been brought into that. But the point is that it's very fun, very exciting, thrilling. We love being part of that. And it kind of takes us back to when we first fell in love. So I was a freshman in college when we met. Jim was a sophomore. And honestly, when we fell in love, I was 18. I was not thinking of a lifetime commitment. I was not thinking about what marriage would be. For me at that point, I just knew I didn't want to say goodbye to Jim. I just knew that I couldn't imagine life without him. And I
felt the same way.
Well, I am glad. So with that, we got engaged. But if I thought at all about marriage, I thought it was a culmination of love and romance. I thought the wedding was like the celebration that you found your person, sealing the deal. I did not know at that age that that was really just the beginning. So recently I talked to a newlywed wife, and she had this very sweet, innocent idea of what marriage would be that was deeply seeped in Hallmark movies. And she really, really thought that her first year of marriage was going to be the very best year of her life. She thought it was going to be some kind of unending date. And she was super disappointed because not only had it not been that, they had happened to encounter a long string of very difficult problems, health things, financial things, all kinds of things. And so it wasn't even just that she was disappointed in the first year of marriage. She was super worried about the future. Like, what does this even mean? Because if this is the best, it's just going to get worse. So before we go on, we want you to consider with us this couple. We think we're going all in, but sometimes it doesn't go that way.
Ready to do this?
So ready.
Jumping off this cliff represents jumping into our future as adventurers. Count of 3. 1, 2, 3!
Honey, what happened?
I'm so sorry. I bailed at the last second, but I'm ready now. I promise.
All right. Ready?
1, 2, 3!
Come on!
Oh, hey, there you are. I feel like you jumped on 2.
Oh, honey, jumping. It's fun. It's really fun, but the point was to do it with you. So if that's gonna be a problem,
No,
just...
I definitely want to do it. It's just that I'm having a hard time getting my legs to cooperate.
Okay.
You're gonna have to push me.
You sure?
Yes. Just one hard push and I'm good.
Okay. Here we go! Oh, come on!
Going all in marriage, right? It doesn't always look what we expect. Sometimes there's things that are unexpected, unseen, and unwanted in our relationships together.
Even when the heart is completely, like I think our friend here, I think he really did want to jump. It was just too much. He just couldn't, right? So going back to this young newlywed wife that spoke to me, my response to her was no. Marriage is like climbing into a box. And as the years go by, that box is going to get smaller and smaller, and you have to keep adjusting. You have to keep moving your arms, your legs, your knees so that you can be comfortable. And that the love and the trust and the care and the sense of commitment that you experience in that very first beginning should actually be eclipsed as the years go on. You should have hope that it is going to get better and better. I know we had a good first few years, but I would never want to go back and redo those first few years. I mean, it's so much sweeter now, so much better. And yet we live in this culture where that really values transactional approaches to everything. That love is a bargain, it's a deal. And honestly, we can kind of overlay that with some cultural themes like how Oprah is always trying to make a religion out of self-actualization and being, everything's about you. And like the Hallmark movies, the rom-coms. So it's very easy to believe that marriage is about feelings and about what you really need and want. But as we think about this cultural ideal of a wedding being a culmination and it really being the beginning, today we want to come to you with another way of thinking about all of this.
And one of my favorite people who writes about marriage from a Christian perspective, particularly from an ethical point of view, is Stanley Hauerwas. And he is a professor at Duke and Notre Dame. And one of the things that he was known to do was he'd walk into his class on one of the opening days when they were talking about family and ethics, and he would write on the chalkboard probably at the time, because this was in the 1970s, he would write, the problem with marriage is we always marry the wrong person. Right? He got a reaction like that, and this is Will Willimon, one of his colleagues, who sort of explains what he meant by this. We marry the wrong person. We're conditioned to think that only what we decide is right for ourselves is actually right for us. The trouble with such a view is that marriage, like parenting, requires us to make sense of being stuck with certain people for no good reason or justification. All right? That's not exactly a romantic view of marriage, but what he's saying is the person that you marry is not the person you are with 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They change. Louise's image of a box of two people in a relationship that are constantly changing, and sometimes those changes don't go as expected. No one anticipates a chronic illness. No one anticipates an addiction. No one anticipates a financial hardship, a loss of a job, a loss of a career, and the ways in which all of those things start to impact the idea I had when I said I do. Now, what Hauerwas wants us to think about is this idea. And he writes about this in a chapter he wrote entitled, Family as the School of Character. When we think about marriage, we think about building a home. Maybe we should think about actually building a school of character. To use Williman's words, the trick is preparing for a lifetime of commitment to someone who is always changing. Morally, we move into the future on the basis of the commitments which we made without knowing what we were getting into, right? That's the challenge. And how we face that, and how we face that together. What he's not saying in this is that all marriage relationships are going to work. What he's not saying is that, or what he's anticipating also in other places, is that marriages may break apart, right? Because they can be irrevocably broken by a lack of faithfulness in a relationship. But what he's also challenging is this idea that when hardship comes in relationship, some people look for an exit rather than an opportunity for growth and change. You think about this, right? These are some of the traditional vows, some language that is commonly used, and people write their own vows and have their own ways of expressing commitment. But just recognize these Protestant or these Protestant vows, and see they sound familiar to many of us. I take thee to be my wedded wife or husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part, according to God's holy ordinance. And thereto I pledge thee my faith. And what we want to do today is hang out on this last idea of pledging our faith together.
So when most people take these vows, or whatever version you take, for better, for worse, let's face it, we are all counting on better, right? For richer or for poorer, we are rooting for richer. In sickness and in health, I know when we got married, we were so young, we were still kind of in that invincible stage. Like, it never entered my mind that maybe somehow we would have to, what would this person be like if we were dealing with a health crisis? Every now and then we go back to these vows, and it's really striking that it ends with pledging faith.
So when we think of faith, we turn to Hebrews 11:1. And these words remind us of what the nature of faith in a Christian life is. It's the confidence that we hope for and the assurance of what we do not see. So important when you think about a life together where you can't anticipate what's coming next. And what's coming next may not be what you want, not what you expect. It might be, I need a push, and there you go. I appreciate what Eugene Peterson, in his paraphrase of this passage, the way he lands this, he says, it's, faith is our handle on what we can't see. And what we want to think with you about is the way in which faith in the context of marriage creates an opportunity for us to face the unknown, the unseen, and the unwanted together. It's interesting, if you go to the psychological research, and research over the last 20 or 30 years have been done, and one of the things that they've found is that couples who have a way of integrating faith into how they see their relationship, they say things like, God is present in my marriage. They say things like, my marriage is influenced by God's actions in our lives, or they say, my marriage is symbolic of God and what I believe about God. When you have this point of view, they call it sanctification, you're more likely to have a satisfied relationship. You're more likely to have a deeper commitment. You're actually better off in your parenting relationships. There's a way in which faith brings life into the context of love. There's a relationship here that we want to explore with you. So when we talk about what marriage is, it is about self-fulfillment, or it is about fulfillment, right? It is about the joy and the pleasure that comes from being together in love. But it's also, if we look at it from a biblical point of view, a school of character, or marriage as a form of discipleship. We're growing together into the character of Christ together. That's what our love is inviting us to do.
So going back to our wedding day, as I mentioned, I really hadn't thought about the marriage part. I just thought about the sealing the deal part. And standing there at the altar, the pastor shared this beautiful homily that I'd never heard before, and he crafted this vision about what God's purpose for marriage was. And I remember standing there thinking, well, wait, stop, like what? What are you saying? Like what is this marriage thing gonna be? And I actually told Jim for the first time last night, in that moment, I thought, I don't know if I'm ready. Like, I don't know, like, what I'm actually getting into here.
And I said, what?
But now I know really none of us knows what we're getting into. And so what our pastor said on that day, which has very much been the themes that we have lived by or tried to live by and that we want to share with you today, is that God in marriage is working to create us in who he wants us to be. And that is the way he loves us. And he loves us unconditionally, sacrificially, and with a purpose. And so I would say 42 years in, we have experienced all the stuff. We have definitely experienced better, and boy, have we experienced worse. Sickness and health. We have been poorer, and we have had times of plenty. And the other thing we want to say to you today as we dive into these three themes is that we are going to give some personal examples, but more as a testimony that's hopefully encouraging. We are not going to give you a formula to follow. We are not going to give you rules that you must remember. We do not assume that anything that works for us is a recipe for you. What we do believe is that there's many, many ways that couples can navigate together in your personality, your circumstances, your maybe cultural background, and we want to give you this broader idea of how to have hope in that. I think that's
So let's dig into these three themes. We think of them as a guiding light, and we've often used those in reference to how we try to live our lives together, and listening for the voice of God to come into those moments of blessing, but also those moments of uncertainty. So when we think about loving unconditionally, that's a really big ask, right? We're broken people in a broken world. We are raised in a conditional environment where we depend on other people to show up for us in particular ways. We are enwrapped in a market culture that reinforces our choice all the time, and in our choice that we get what we paid for, right? So it's very easy to approach a relationship in a contractual kind of mindset. And from a biblical point of view, from a Christian point of view, we're invited to move from that kind of contractual understanding to a covenantal understanding. Right? That's how God relates to us. We think of this kind of simply as belonging leads to becoming, right? And if you think about the story of the gospel in Scripture, God is always taking initiative and inviting the people of Israel into a relationship, right? The Exodus comes before the 10 Commandments, right? Jesus comes as God incarnate, dies on the cross, is raised again, and invites us in to his family as his brother, as his sister, as his friend, as family. We belong first, and then we become the people of God. We belong first in marriage, and we become what it means to be in love. Our contractual mindset oftentimes puts the becoming before the belonging, right? I will love you, or we will love better when you do something different, when you are something different. Our relationship is dependent on you becoming something for me, as opposed to starting with our belonging together. So when we think about this, right, and from a biblical point of view, the language of covenant is used to describe what God does with the people of Israel. We also think about the language of covenant when we talk about Christian marriage. And the heart of a covenant is a promise that is made with an anticipation of the future, and we're doing the same in our relationships together. These are the words from Genesis chapter 17, God promising Abraham a future, God promising Abraham a land, God promising Abraham a people. I will always keep the promise I made to you and your descendants because I am your God and their God. I will give you and them the land in which you are a foreigner. I will give you the whole land of Canaan for your family forever, and I will be their God. God promises a relationship that promotes identity. God promises a relationship that promises a future. We do the same thing. When we move into marriage, when those vows that we just read, those are promises that we are making for a reality that doesn't exist, right? We're not prepared. We might be in love, but we're really not prepared for the future of marriage when we say I do. It's a promise we're moving into. It reminds me of Max Dupree, who is an author who writes on leadership. He says, when anyone is ever promoted, they're always temporarily incompetent, right? They're not ready for the work that they've been hired to do or promoted to do. The same thing is true here. We're not really ready for this adventure that we're moving into together. So when we think about covenant keeping as a couple, it's an act of commitment that we make. We're promising faithfulness to each other. It requires the acceptance of the other person to us. And growth is both the reason for this covenant as well as the result of it, right? If I make this promise, it requires something of me. If I keep this promise, I will grow as a person.
So then we think about what is it actually, how do we bring that into being in our marriages? How do we live that out? One thing that we talk about a lot is maybe we don't have enough love, but the lover of our souls who is present with us, that's where the love comes from, even when we don't have it. So I have found these kinds of prayers to be very helpful to me, and I offer them in case they're useful to you. But sometimes, I might have, or Jim might have, legitimate needs or wants or disappointments and our differences. I want Jim to react the way I do, or I want him to at least understand the way I'm feeling. So sometimes these are the kinds of prayers I'll pray. Like, God, I need the grace and help to love Jim with tenderness and kindness right now. God, I choose to trust you for what I need, and please animate my thinking on how I can show up for Jim and what he needs. God, help me to continue to choose Jim no matter what. God, Jim and I are reacting to this development so differently. I really wish he understood me because right now I'm feeling alone in my reaction. But help me love Jim as he needs to be loved right now. It's just that constant, unconditional, it's not about me, it's how I show up for him. But our human inclinations to pull back. The inclinations like, I am hurt, I don't feel understand, I'm gonna pull back, I wanna hide. It's not to go towards in a moment like that. And yet those marriage promises that we make at our weddings anticipates that disappointment and anticipates betrayal, maybe not a grand betrayal, but even in those daily kinds of our spouse maybe not being all that we want. I remember once Jim and I had a conversation years ago, and we were in that very, very busy time of 2 big jobs, 3 kids, and a lot of you are probably living that or you did live it. And I remember we said, wow, it doesn't feel good to walk into the house and be ignored. Like, we need to remember to just stop, even if it's 30 seconds, to say like, hey, you're home. So great to see you. And it was unbelievable. Like, honestly, when you brought that up, I was like, another thing to do. But it really does make a difference. And we have really incorporated that. So sometimes these things are little, but they have a very big impact.
We haven't gone as far as the couple that did a ritual called Beat the Dog, which meant that they had a golden retriever, and the couples created a competition that you needed to greet your partner when they came home better than the dog did. So, right? Well, we can ask this question, well, what does belonging actually look like, okay? What does belonging look like day to day, right? We've said that we are conditioned to be conditional, right? That's the world that we are in. But if we're leaning into belonging, what does it look like? Well, there's 3 ideas here. When we talk about a romantic attachment and we look for security in a relationship, it's really as simple as answering this question. Are you there for me when I need you? Can I count on you to be there when I need you most? In a time of uncertainty, and in a time that's unexpected. And so you can use this as an acronym. And Heather, I think, will talk more about this in her talk, but accessibility, responsiveness, and emotional engagement. That's the heart of what belonging is. I am available for you. I am here for you. We are emotionally connected. We are emotionally engaged. I'm recognizing that says, I'm here for me. I wrote that slide. I'm responsive to me. Good job. But what does that mean? Well, you can get my attention when you need me. It's accessible. You can share what's on your mind and heart, and I will respond. That's accessibility, like I'm here. But then the next question is, do I actually see you? Right? That's where empathy comes into mind. Can I come and stand in your shoes? Can I see what it's like for you when you need a list? You need an agenda. You need organization.
Structure.
And structure. And I'm living life in spontaneity and freedom. But I get you, and I can stand with you, and I can stand in your experience. I can stand in your disappointment, even though it's not mine. And that we have a sense that we are in this together. We feel comfortable being close to and trusting each other, right? This is a picture. Are you there for me? That's the security that we need that fosters the belonging that's necessary for becoming the people that God calls us to be in marriage. The second theme we want to touch on is sacrificial, that God loves us sacrificially. We say that this is putting our spouse ahead of ourselves. And we want to share just this couple who's capturing their own experience of what sacrifice means in their relationship.
Moving from America to Israel was very hard. You don't want to give up all your friends, you don't want to give up all your habits, all your social life. But then again, I did. But he would continue with his life. He would play bridge, he was in the army. And
almost every night she was crying for the first 2 years, which was very, very hard.
I was saying, this isn't what I'm signed up for. This isn't, you work all day.
I didn't get it. I really didn't get it in the beginning.
Yeah.
I didn't. I don't know if it's a man thing, but I just didn't.
It's not just a man thing. It's couples. Couples do this. I mean, I'm not saying don't keep your hobbies and don't go off and with your friends. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to be sensitive to the other person.
I didn't understand the sacrifice that Miriam did for me. We always loved each other. No, I don't think that there was ever a question about that. But she did a big sacrifice, and I didn't even get it. I had my friends. I was a very busy guy. It took me a while to really understand that, I need to pay a lot more attention to her and to her needs, and just appreciate what she did. I really didn't get it in the beginning.
I actually didn't get it until now either. He's never expressed the word sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A moment, it's never too late to notice what someone else has done for you, right? This is a clip from a documentary that several of us put together when I was living in Los Angeles, where we just found couples who had been together over 25 years and did interviews with them to try to capture their story. Because often this group of colleagues that I was working with are therapists, and they were having couples come into their offices asking, well, we don't really know what a long-term relationship looks like. So we wanted to pull together some examples of this, and this is the kind of the story that is told. And this idea of sacrifice is seen sometimes in the rearview mirror when it's been going on all along. So when we think about this and we're talking about the character quality that we're developing in the school of character in marriage is one of humility. And I think Paul's words in Philippians 2 captures this well, where he's writing about the community of faith coming together in the same spirit of Christ's love and being united in that. And he writes, now make me completely happy. Live in harmony by showing love for each other. Think about this in the context of a marriage relationship too. Put it in what you think as if you were one person, right? This idea of we are one flesh. Don't be jealous or proud, but be humble and consider others more important than yourselves. Consider your partner, your spouse, more important than you. Care about them as much as you care about your own needs, your own self.
So when we think about sacrifice, as Jim just said, it involves a humility to set aside maybe what you're thinking, feeling, expecting, wanting to receive from your spouse. So we want to pause here to say what we are not talking about. We're not talking about control. We're not talking about my spouse just gets to control everything. We're not talking about reshaping a spouse into what you want them to be. We're not talking about getting them to do what you want or even need. That's not what we're meaning. We're certainly not talking about bad behavior. And we don't know, most of you, we don't know what you might be dealing with. But sometimes there's significant issues that need to be addressed. And when we say humility and sacrifice, we don't necessarily mean putting up with bad behavior. And character is a lifelong process. Marriage can really smooth over those rough edges over time. We're not talking about character, but there are some character flaws that are deeply troubling. But what we are talking about is a person's nature, the nature of who they are, their innate way of being, their personalities, their strengths. And we're talking about how to respect your spouse and how to receive respect from your spouse with the goal of loving them enough to help them grow and become what God intended. I remember our pastor, again, this homily was like seriously very impactful. So in our wedding, he was talking about how sacrifice can, the easy thing or the grand sweeping gestures. If you have an opportunity maybe to literally save your spouse's life, or you donate a kidney, like actually those big ones, they're kind of easy and it's kind of fun to be the hero. But it's very much harder in this day-to-day, how do I show up for my spouse? How do I receive from them? We mentioned earlier that we are basically different in every possible way. And I don't know how we didn't realize that before we got married. Like, how is that even possible?
It's love.
So, I mean, he is fluid, I'm structured. He's all about ideas, I'm about actions. He processes in his head. I almost can't think unless I'm talking. There's plenty of ways. There's plenty of ways that can be friction. But for us, it's just constantly, okay, is it going to be your way? Is it going to be my way? Or how can it be our way?
And one of the things that we want to do is take these theological ideas that are shaping the character that we are trying to grow into because of the character of God and the character of Christ in our lives, and ask, what do they look like in day-to-day life? And one of the concepts that John Gottman, a researcher at the University of Washington, and Neil Jacobson, many of you may be familiar with his work, writes about, and some of the research that they found was that accepting influence is associated with well-adjusted relationships. And this idea of accepting influence is putting the other ahead of yourself. And the irony about this is not only if I accept Louise's influence on me, does our relationship improve, I actually have more influence because I've accepted her influence on me. So just think about this, true or false, right? In your relationship, is this true of you? I'm really interested in my partner's opinion on our basic issues. True or false? I usually learn a lot from my partner even when we disagree. True or false? I want my partner to feel that what they say really counts with me. True or false? I generally want my partner to feel influential in this relationship. And finally, true or false? I try to communicate respect even during our disagreements, right? That's putting the other first. That's accepting their influence. That's actually investing. Like when we think about sacrifice, we're talking about dedication. Like I'm dedicated to you and I'm dedicated to you for us. And in doing so, we're honoring God and honoring Christ's work in our own life because we are stepping down, stepping behind, putting the other ahead of us. The third and last category is this notion of loving with purpose. This is still mine, right?
Yes, yes.
Purposeful love. And that one of the things that the way we kind of framed this was living love with the end in mind. And, it's often attributed to Søren Kierkegaard, this idea that we live life moving forward and understand it looking backwards, right? We understand our life from where we've come and then look back and see what has happened. And so when we talk about living love with the end in mind, one of the things we're thinking about is imagine where you might be 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, and you're looking back at the relationship you've had. And this video came to mind when we were thinking about this.
I want to fall in love at 85, go on shuffleboard dates, and dance to hip-hop from 95. We'd rock matching tracksuits and rope gold chains. We'd look like Run DMC, but in their old age. We'd take aerobics classes and wear bifocal glasses and eat at IHOP and hold hands at Sunday masses. And when it comes to the bedroom, well, nothing much would happen in the bedroom because we're 85. But we would still be down to take a walk or take a drive or sit and talk or have a drink, watch the passersby, ask each other why and how and who and where and when, and then we'd laugh and cry again about the people we had been. I would touch her withered skin and comment on how thin it is to keep in something infinite. And she would smile, sweet and blush, then tell me that I think too much. She's right, I think too much. It's always been a problem. But then again, that's how I made my green like the goblin. When I was in my 20s, I was eating top ramen, counting up my pennies saving up to go food shopping. But now I'm 85, and somehow I feel more alive. I turned my hearing aid up and bumped Jurassic 5. And when it comes to the bedroom, well, hopefully, every once in a while, she lets me knock her boots into the floral patterns of our bedpost, then hold her head close like death isn't chasing us, planning on erasing us and replacing us with better versions of us, reshaping us, remaking us, then recreating us with new identities so we can make new memories. Hush, little baby. Learn to walk and talk and think and lie and feel and fight and love and die and never get the answers why. She dips a joint of grass in wheatgrass and we get high. Her hair is silver as the moon in the Miami sky. We still pop pills, but it's not the Xanax anymore. Whenever we can't sleep, we listen to the ocean floor. She got a Sound of the Sea CD for me from the Brookstone store, and ever since I've been snoring like a really good metaphor for snoring. Sorry, I go blank sometimes. What? I'm 85. I'm not complaining. I'm just happy that I'm still alive. And happy that I have my better half by my side, Superfly. She doesn't look a day over 65. When I first saw her, I was totally in awe. She was classical, so I was like, yo, yo, ma. And that was all it took. A single look and I was shook. I fell for her like some loose shingles from our Spanish roof. And I'ma love her till she loses every last root and has to glue dentures to her gums to chew solid food. Ooh, now that's real love, dude. That's some push comes to shove love. Not when it's convenient, love. Hospital bed love. Feed her ice chips, love. Never leave the room, love. Sleeping in the chair, love. Pray to up above, love. Have to pull the plug. Miss her in my bones, love. Everything about her, love. Die within a month, love. Can't live without her, love. Love. The only reason that we are alive. And none of us should have to wait until we're 85.
So in that homily, a pastor turned to me and he was quoting from Ephesians 5. And he was saying, Jim, I want you to imagine that you're standing before Jesus at the end of your lives, and Louise is standing beside you, and you're saying, you're presenting her to him, saying, Lord, here is your Louise, who you gave to me. She's more beautiful, more radiant, more the purpose that you created her for through the love that you blessed us both with, right? That our love could actually have a redemptive purpose, and that God's school of character is actually God's creative genius in marriage to grow me and to grow her. Eugene Peterson writes it this way: husbands, go out in your love for your wives exactly as Christ did for the church, a love marked by giving, not getting. Christ's love makes the church whole. His words evoke her beauty. Everything he does and says is designed to bring the best out of her, dressing her in dazzling white silk, radiant with holiness. And that is how husbands ought to love their wives. They're really doing themselves a favor, since they're already one in marriage.
We are just about out of time, so we're going to cut this. I think we had. Okay, so I'm going to have to give this story in 1 minute. We present to you the Muir Woods fight of 1996.
It lives on in infamy.
We were furious at each other in this photo, but we thought, gosh, we're here.
Take advantage.
And the reason we end with this is just to say it's a long arc, right? So in this moment, we'd been married, I think, 13, 14 years. We had 3 kids, ages maybe 3, 5, and 8. And at that point, Jim was working full-time, and for many reasons, I was at home full-time with the kids. And we had the chance we lived in LA, we were up in Northern California, we had a chance to go away for a weekend, and we wanted to equally have just fun, be on a little adult break, but also we had some things we wanted to talk through. And Jim challenged me to say, I think you have gifts and strengths and talents that can't be contained just within the walls of our home. I really think there's an opportunity for you to contribute professionally. Of course, I heard it as an expectation. I heard it that he didn't see the value of me taking care of the kids full time, thus the fight. But the bottom line is that because of that, over the next whatever it was year or so, I ended up joining in the workforce. And now, just like Faith, just like we don't know what we're going to anticipate, we don't know what's coming, he had no way of knowing when he challenged me and said, I will do this with you, it changed everything. We ended up just splitting all this stuff. He'd get up and leave at 5 a.m. to beat the LA traffic so I could get the kids off to school. Then he was home to receive them. When they came home, he cooked almost all the meals. The point being, him supporting me really impacted him. And then that culminated 10 years ago when I got this offer to come to Seattle Pacific University, which meant that We ended up selling our family home. And he had really a job he loved. It was the job he was really born to do. He had an endowed chair, full professor at Fuller, loved his colleagues, loved the students. But to support me, he ended up leaving that. I keep wanting, I could cry. But also, maybe you'd want to just share how that then opened up different opportunity for you.
And this kind of, the complement of that was, even though I was letting go of something that I had built really much of my whole career around, it was actually opening up new doors that Louise could see better than I could, of how my classroom could, and students could turn into professionals around the world for this work that I was having an opportunity to do that I would have never had that chance from where I was in my regular academic position. So this idea that God is at work in his redemptive purpose is causing us to grow, and that the purpose of marriage, yes, is about self-fulfillment. Yes, we do care and we do invest in our relationship, and happiness is important, but growth is too. This is a school of character. This is a school of discipleship. So as we leave you, we want you just to think about, when you think about your partner, your spouse, you think a gift, a talent, or strength, what one comes to mind when you think of this person that may be sitting right next to you right now? How do you see God at work in that strength in their life right now? What's one way that you could think about honoring or inviting or growing what you see in them? And how might you make this an everyday part of your life together, where our focus is on growing in Christ together? Thank you for this opportunity for us to be able to join you. Thank you for Scott and Bethany community for this opportunity to share a bit of our story with you. Thank you.